I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I didn't say a word. I just secretly replaced it with industrial superglue. And what happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I sat at the kitchen table. The silence in the house was as thick as morning fog. A silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each beat was a painful reminder of a life I was beginning to suspect was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband Julian had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He looked not merely exhausted, but haunted, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was a map of fatigue and guilt, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that had never been there before. He tossed his jacket on the sofa with a weariness that felt performative, loosened his tie as if it were a noose he was desperate to escape, and collapsed onto the bed. The familiar springs groaned under his weight. He didn't even bother to shower. The faint scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new, alien fragrance. A sweet floral perfume that felt like an intrusion. A brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. A few minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house. That sound once brought me comfort, but now it felt like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, and began to tidy up the mess he'd left. His jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen was still on, a new email glowing like a sinister omen. I frowned. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now, an email. It was right there in plain sight. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. Out of a morbid curiosity that felt both wrong and necessary, I opened it. The message was short. A mere handful of words that would shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a red heart. That symbol of affection pierced my own heart with a cold, sharp ache. I froze as if someone had slapped me. The digital world was a cruel mirror, reflecting a truth I was too terrified to see. Dad. The word echoed in my mind. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, affectionate tone? I swiped down, my thumb trembling, looking for more clues. But there was nothing. Just a strange email address, a jumble of meaningless characters that offered no answers, only more questions. A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from a profound, bone-deep fear. It felt like a cold wind coming in through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I glanced at the bedroom and saw Julian turn over with a sputtering snore. His face still and peaceful, a stark and infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's, a frantic, guilty beat. I quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I continued cleaning up, my movements now mechanical, robotic. I gathered his dirty clothes to take to the laundry. As I checked his pant pockets, I felt a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. I frowned. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Dallas. A tiny bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio, on the other hand, was where his mother had lived before she passed away. He had fond memories there, a fact he had often reminded me of. But who had he had dinner with in San Antonio while lying to me about being in Dallas? The receipt showed a party of 2, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a wine he had bought me for our 10th anniversary, a wine I had never forgotten, and main courses of filet and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Julian took me to a place like that. Maybe 10 years ago when I opened my first bakery. It was a memory etched in my mind, the flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the way he toasted my success. Now that memory was a lie. A faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. I took out my own phone and, with a silent, determined resolve, snapped a picture of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, but a wife of 40 years' intuition is a deep, primal knowing. Something was going on, and I had to find out what it was. My hands were trembling, not just with anger, but with a deep existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume from his clothes. I opened the door, a small, cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my flashlight and checked every corner of the driver's seat. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just some loose change and an empty water bottle. But as I reached into the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out and my heart almost stopped. A tube of used personal lubricant with dried residue on the cap. A sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a dirty secret, a tangible manifestation of my worst fears. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So what was this lubricant for? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I felt paralyzed, but kept a clear head, a survival instinct kicking in. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw, as if I were afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent mark on my skin. I continued searching, this time more carefully, more methodically. Under the back seat, I found some crumpled napkins soaked in a sweet floral perfume that wasn't a man's and wasn't my soft, familiar rose fragrance. The scent was alien, defiant, a loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I took photos of everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any flour sack I had ever lifted. The next morning, just as the sun rose and the soft light filtered through the window curtains, I was already awake, a ghost in my own house. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email wouldn't stop swirling in my head, a venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen with my hands busy, but my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast, 2 fried eggs, some toast, and a cup of the strong black coffee Julian liked. I had barely slept all night. Julian came down looking tired, his hair a mess, and his eyes still groggy. He sat at the table, grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip, and set it down half full. "I have an important meeting today," he said in a husky voice, a rehearsed line he'd used countless times before, but this time he didn't look me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the casual tone, it made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted to do was scream, "Where is the meeting? With whom? In San Antonio? Again?" But I held back, my rage a silent fire, and simply replied, "All right, be careful." He got up, gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence and me with a suspicion that was growing into a monstrous certainty. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and looked for the number for Mrs. Miller, a friend from years ago who had helped me so much when I first opened the bakery. She had once told me about a good private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Juliet, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number. He's very discreet and reliable," she had said. I never thought I would need to call him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring a drum beat of my mounting anxiety. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds, a pause that spoke volumes, before answering. "Juliet, what's going on? Did Julian do something?" I sighed, not wanting to get into the details over the phone, my pride bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed immediately. Just an hour later, I received a message from Thomas asking me to meet him at noon at a small cafe downtown. Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you, he wrote. The message was short, but it was enough to give me a little relief, a lifeline in a sea of deceit. At noon, I went to the cafe, a tiny place with worn wooden tables and the aroma of roasted coffee filling the air, a scent that usually comforted me, but now felt strangely foreign. I chose a secluded corner where no one would notice me, a shadow in a room full of light. Thomas walked in, a middle-aged man, short and stocky, with a simple light blue shirt and philosophical eyes that seemed to read everything, to see through the surface of things. I handed him a flash drive with the photos I had taken the night before, the strange email, the restaurant receipt, the lubricant tube, and some napkins. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image on his phone, his face impassive, a professional facade hiding whatever thoughts he had. He carefully made notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." I looked at him, trying to hold back the tears that were burning my eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. "I just want to know the truth, whatever it may be." Thomas nodded, with a compassionate look, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I'll do my best. Go home and don't do anything to arouse suspicion." I left the cafe and walked through the crowd, but I felt a loneliness I had never experienced before. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime built on a foundation of trust that was now crumbling beneath my feet. I had put all my faith in Julian. I always believed he was a family man, someone who would be with me through any difficulty. He was my rock, my anchor, and now here I was, hiring a stranger to follow my own husband. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt like I was in a bad movie, a character in a drama I never auditioned for. That night, as I sat in the bakery, the familiar scent of yeast and flour, a constant soothing presence, my phone vibrated. A message from Mr. Thomas. I opened it, my heart pounding a mile a minute, the blood roaring in my ears. It was a photo of Julian in the light blue shirt he often wore, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in on the image, and my heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a tight black dress with heavy makeup, intense red lipstick, and her hair down. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law, but like a couple on a date. Their bodies turned toward each other, a shared secret between them. I sank into my chair, my hand trembling as I held the phone. Allison, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated like my own daughter, whom I had taught how to make our family's traditional flan. And Julian, the man I had given my whole life to. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions were a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I saved all the photos and the video to a flash drive, making a note of every detail: date, time, place, even the name of the restaurant. My hands worked on autopilot, but my mind was in chaos. I couldn't believe Julian and Allison were capable of something so low, so cruel. But the evidence was right in front of me, undeniable, a mountain of proof. I stayed in the bakery among trays of sweet pastries that smelled delicious, but I felt like my world was falling apart. I remembered the early days of the business, when Julian would help me carry sacks of flour, when we would laugh together in that little kitchen, our dreams as big as the sky. Now it all seemed like a distant memory, a beautiful lie I had lived for too long. The next morning, I was in the small kitchen of the bakery, holding a list of orders for a large hotel downtown. The smell of flour and vanilla, which always brought me peace, felt empty that day, a hollow comfort. As soon as I finished signing the delivery invoice, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands and my heart sank when I saw it was a message from the detective. Just a short sentence. Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I opened the message. A series of photos appeared on the screen. The first showed Julian in his usual gray shirt, leaving a law office near the main plaza. By his side was Allison in a beige office dress, her hair in a high ponytail and huge dark sunglasses, a pathetic attempt at anonymity. They were walking very close together, not like in-laws, but like a couple. In the next photo, they were standing in front of a 4-star hotel with gleaming glass doors and a gold sign. I zoomed in, desperately looking for some sign to deny what I was seeing, but there was nothing. They looked too natural, too comfortable together, a part of a world I was not a part of. Then came a short video from Mr. Thomas. I pressed play, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst, a frantic drum against my ribs. The shot was from a distance, but it was clear enough to see Julian and Allison on the 3rd-floor balcony of the hotel. His arm was around her waist, and she was resting her head on his shoulder. Then, like a stab, I saw them share a quick kiss without trying to hide. It was a brief kiss, but it was enough to burn away the last spark of hope I had left. I replayed the video frame by frame, each image digging deeper into my soul, a slow, agonizing descent into hell. The room curtain opened slightly, and Allison came out, running to hug Julian, her face lit up with happiness, as if she were a young girl in love. I slumped into the chair, clutching the edge of the table to keep from falling apart. Mr. Thomas wrote, "They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep an eye on them." Just a few hours earlier, Julian had written to me, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." Now I knew it was all a lie. He wasn't out of town. He was here in a 4-star hotel with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my portable hard drive and carefully saved every photo and every video. We were young once, and Julian had promised our love would last forever. Now seeing this, all I saw was lies and blatant betrayal. I remembered family gatherings. Allison always sat far away from Julian, looking at him with disgust. Daniel would joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I believed it. But now I understood it had all been a farce. They acted too well in front of me, in front of Daniel. I felt like a fool, a blind wife, betrayed by 2 traitors right in front of my eyes. I replied to Thomas, "Thank you. Please keep watching. I need to know everything." That night, I returned to the house that had been my home with Julian. It felt foreign now, a place of ghosts and lies. I opened the dresser drawer and took out a thick envelope. I printed all the evidence, arranged them carefully, sealed the envelope, and hid it at the bottom of the drawer under old family photos. I looked at a picture of the 4 of us, Julian, Allison, Daniel, and me, at Daniel's birthday party. Now looking at it, all I wanted was to rip it to pieces. The next morning, just before dawn, Julian staggered in, smelling of alcohol. "The partner was too difficult, Juliet," he complained, his eyes red. "I had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired." He was performing, and I felt like he was rubbing salt in a wound. "Rest," I replied calmly. "You have to go to work tomorrow." When I was sure Julian was asleep, my phone vibrated. It was a call from Mr. Thomas. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used special equipment. They didn't even notice. I'm sending it to you now." My heart pounded hard, but I simply replied, "Thank you, Thomas. Send me the file." Minutes later, an audio file appeared. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was Allison's voice, cold and ambitious, a stranger's voice. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want to have that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." I felt a blow to my chest. Then came Julian's voice, deep and confident. "Don't worry about those papers. Juliet doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much." It felt like a knife twisting in my heart. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to take everything I had built, the bakery chain, all the sweat, tears, and sleepless nights, and now he and Allison wanted to take it all away. I still had the composure to copy the audio to the flash drive where I kept the other evidence. The next morning, Thomas sent another batch of new photos. Julian and Allison were inside his car with a thick pile of papers in front of them. Allison was marking the document intently. Thomas wrote, "I overheard something. It seems they want to use a contact at the notary's office to make the transfer. I'll investigate further." I knew they were planning to steal everything I had worked for, step by step. I sat there among the trays of sweet pastries, feeling as if my whole world was collapsing. I listened to the audio again. That wretched old woman. That's what Allison called me. I remembered teaching her how to make rice, hugging her like a daughter. And Julian, the man I had loved since I was a girl. They had made a joke of me. That night at dinner, Julian said, "Juliet, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over. They're complicated." I knew he was testing the waters, trying to drag me into his dirty plan. I gave him a dry smile and replied, "Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm tired now." He nodded, took a sip of wine. When he got up, staggering, and went to the bedroom, I cleared the table, containing the anger that was boiling inside me. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, and left his car keys on the nightstand. A siren's call to my revenge. I stared at them. This was my chance. I grabbed the keys and went straight to the garage. I opened the glove compartment, and there it was, the tube of lubricant. It was clear they had used it again. I took the tube of lubricant to the kitchen. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear industrial superglue, the same kind I once used to fix a chair at the bakery. It was a tool of my trade, now a weapon of my revenge. I carefully filled the lubricant tube with the glue, drop by drop, until it was completely full. I wiped the nozzle, shook it gently, and tested it a little. It came out smoothly, just like the original lubricant. At a glance, no one would notice the difference. I smiled faintly. This wasn't a game. It was the first step to getting justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted the floor mat and the seat just as they were, and closed the car. I opened the trunk to check. There were only crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom lying in a corner. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised anymore. I took pictures, adding them to the growing collection of evidence. Back in the house, I put the keys back in their place next to Julian's alarm clock. I thought of Daniel, my son, who believed he was living happily with Allison. How could I tell him that his wife and his own father were betraying us? Julian had never understood my business, but I trusted that he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. He didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. I woke up at 5 in the morning when it was still dark. Only the faint light from the street lights was coming through the window. The house was silent. All I could hear was Julian's steady snoring from the bedroom. I was in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the skillet of oil that was already on the stove. It was the last step of my plan, a simple smoke trap, but enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter. I ran it over to the window and attached it to a heavy object, an old coffee can I found in the cabinet. All I had to do was pull it from a distance, and the flame would ignite the oil, creating thick black smoke, enough to alarm the neighbors. I opened the window by the stove a little so the smoke could get out. I checked everything again, making sure not to leave any trace that might make Julian suspicious. I put on a jacket, grabbed my large purse, and pretended to be leaving for my trip. Before I left, I went into the bedroom and gently shook Julian. "I have to go to the bus station right now," I said in a calm voice. "I'm going to sign a contract. I'll probably be back late tonight." He opened his eyes and, in a sleepy voice, replied, "All right. Be careful, Juliet. Call me if you need anything." Then he buried his face in his pillow and went back to sleep. I looked at the man I once loved, now lying there unaware of the trap waiting for him. I turned away, my heart heavy, but my legs steady. Instead of going to the station, I went across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She opened the door and looked at me, worried, when she saw my purse. "Juliet, what are you doing up so early?" "Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "Mrs. Peterson, can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house." She poured me a hot cup of coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see the entrance to my house where Julian and Allison would enter and where the truth would be revealed. Around 10 o'clock, a taxi pulled up in front of the house. Allison got out wearing a light floral dress and dark sunglasses, as if she were afraid someone would recognize her. Julian opened the door, looked around in a hurry, and quickly ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's time," I murmured, and turned on the app on my phone connected to the hidden recorder I had left in the bedroom. The sound started coming through my headphones. Allison's laughter, the clinking of glasses, heavy footsteps. Then I heard Julian's deep voice. "All right, we don't have to hide in a hotel anymore." Allison laughed. "You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right?" I bit my lips, holding back the rage as I listened to her call me the old hag with so much contempt. Then the bed started to creak along with other sounds I didn't want to keep listening to. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself, "Just a little longer, Juliet. Just a little longer." A few minutes later, suddenly, Allison screamed, "What the hell is this? We're stuck!" Her voice was filled with panic, almost sobbing. Julian growled, "Shut up!" "Wait, let me see," I smiled. I barely touched my phone and activated the smoke trap remotely. The string pulled hard. The stove ignited. The skillet of oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen window in thick spirals, spreading outside like an alarm signal. Mrs. Peterson gasped. She looked out the window. "Juliet, your house is on fire." I pretended to be scared, but inside I felt strangely calm. Neighbors started coming out into their yards, shouting, "Juliet's house is on fire! Call the firefighters!" A man nearby, Mr. Miller, quickly took out his phone and called the city fire department. I stayed there, holding my coffee cup tightly, my eyes fixed on my house. Everything was going according to plan. In my headphones, Allison's voice sounded more and more desperate. "Julian, do something." "I can't move," Julian's voice roared. "Don't scream." "I'm trying." But I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue I had swapped was already at work, leaving them trapped at their most humiliating moment. They wanted to take my bakery, my family, even my honor. Now I would make them pay. Just 10 minutes later, the siren of a fire truck sounded at the end of the street like a death knell. I saw Daniel jump out of the driver's seat in his fire chief uniform, his face tense. My son shouted in a firm voice, "Get the equipment ready, quick!" There might be people inside. I looked at him and felt a sharp pain. My son, always so proud of his family. Now he was about to face the cruelest truth. I wanted to run and hug him, but I had no other choice. Daniel led the way with a sledgehammer, breaking down the front door. The sound of splintering wood echoed in the air. Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Allison's sobs came through my headset. "Do something, Julian! I can't move! Shut up! Don't scream!" Daniel entered the bedroom, and I could imagine what he found. His own father and his wife, naked, stuck to each other on the bed, their faces pale with panic. Through my headphones, I heard Daniel's voice falter. "What? What is this?" A firefighter behind him murmured in surprise, "Oh my God!" I knew that cry wasn't just to maintain order, but my son's last attempt to hide his pain. The humiliation was now exposed not just to Daniel, but to the entire fire team and the whole neighborhood. The neighbors were crowding together, pointing and whispering. "What's happening?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law," a woman shouted. Poor Juliet. How did it come to this? Mrs. Peterson, standing next to me, took out her phone and silently started recording, moving the camera closer to the scene. She looked at me with eyes full of pity and anger. "Juliet, you knew about this, didn't you?" I just nodded softly without taking my eyes off the window. The firefighters had to act. They wrapped sheets around Julian and Allison, trying to cover their stuck-together bodies, and carried them out on stretchers. I could hear Allison's broken sobs mixed with her groans of pain. "Please do something. I can't stand it anymore," Julian just mumbled weakly. "Don't let anyone see us." But the whole neighborhood had already seen. They were carried out wrapped in a thin sheet amidst the growing murmurs. What a disgrace. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. My God, how filthy! The ambulance left with its siren blaring. I pretended to be surprised as if I had just run there from the bus station. Daniel stood motionless in the yard, his arms hanging, his face pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided looking at him. I stayed there, letting everything take its course. Hours later, at the hospital, a doctor came out. "Mrs. Roberts, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, there was no serious damage. They just need some skin ointment." I nodded, pretending to be relieved, while my fingers discreetly brushed against my purse, where I had hidden 2 tubes of thick mustard I had prepared. The nurse, a young woman, looked at me with compassion. "Ma'am, This is a very difficult situation. I'm so sorry. I gave a weak smile, and the moment she turned around, I swapped the tubes for the mustard I had in my purse. I entered the hospital room with a tube of mustard in my hand, feigning concern. Julian, Allison, are you okay? Allison was in bed, unable to look at me. Julian mumbled, Juliet, I can explain. I placed the tube of mustard on the table next to the bed and left. Minutes later, a gut-wrenching scream came from the room. Allison was covering her face, crying. It burns! My skin is on fire. Julian was writhing in bed, cursing. What the hell is this? Who did this? The entire hallway was in an uproar. The humiliation of Julian and Allison was already public. Mrs. Peterson's video had spread throughout social media. Daniel entered the room with a thick folder in his hand. I had called him to get the envelope with the evidence and the 2 divorce papers I had ready. I looked at Julian directly in the eyes, my voice cold but firm. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these and then do whatever you want as long as you disappear from my son's life and mine. Allison collapsed, crying, looking at Daniel. Honey, forgive me. I made a mistake. Please, I beg you, forgive me. But Daniel just looked at her, his gaze as hard as stone, and left without saying a word. Julian tried to grab my hand. Juliet, listen to me. I didn't want this. I pulled away, cutting him off. Don't say anything else, Julian. You chose this path. I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. I put my hand on his shoulder. Mom, he whispered, his voice broken. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I didn't answer. I just hugged him tightly. In that moment, I knew that Julian and Allison had lost everything, but Daniel and I had also lost a family. Moving forward, a few weeks after the scandal, my bakery was busier than ever. The little bell on the door wouldn't stop ringing. Juliet, you are so strong, Mrs. Peterson said. The whole neighborhood is proud of you for how you defended your family business. I smiled and thanked her. People supported me. They called me a strong woman. Daniel moved in with me right after that day. Mom, I want to stay here for a while, he told me. I'm going to help you run the bakery. He wasn't the cheerful, always laughing Daniel he used to be. Every morning we opened the bakery together. I prepared the oven and Daniel reviewed invoices and called hotels and restaurants. These simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. It was just Daniel and me, taking care of what we still had. I started making time for myself. I joined a cooking club, I went to church, and I went for walks with Mrs. Peterson. You know, Juliet, she would say, everyone is still talking about Julian and Allison. But they say you're the one who won. I just smiled without answering. I won, maybe, but the price was losing my whole family. Daniel started to change too. He became less quiet and began telling me about his work as a firefighter. We put out a fire at the market yesterday, he told me one night. It was really dangerous, Mom. Please be careful, I said, my voice trembling. You're all I have left. Daniel looked at me with tenderness. Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone. I looked at the trays of flan and pastries and thought about the entire journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands. Julian and Allison wanted to take everything from me, but failed. I kept my bakery, I kept Daniel, and most importantly, I kept myself. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending us super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect, I